Hello everyone, and this is BioPhoenix here, and today we're going to be doing something that I have not done in a long time, and that happens to be a PC game. Well, to be more accurate, it's an MS-DOS game, which I haven't done before, but still I'm playing it on the PC. And it happens to be Hugo's House of Horror, and it was developed and published by Grey Design Associations, and it was released in 1990. And this game is exclusively to computers such as Windows and MS-DOS. And as you can tell, the MS-DOS version is the one I'm playing. And weirdly enough, I've actually never played the Windows version, so if there's anything different, I really don't know what it would be. So it's an adventure game, but this is not just like any other adventure game, this is one where you have to type in everything. But I'll explain more on that in a bit, so for now let's talk about the story. So you play as a character named Hugo who has to rescue his girlfriend named Penelope, and Penelope was being kidnapped by a giant spider, and now you just gotta get off your ass and do it, and that's pretty much about it. In fact, if this story sounds just like anything else, it actually sounds a lot like Maniac Mansion. In fact, there's a lot of similarities between the two, but believe it or not, I actually played this game way before I knew about Maniac Mansion. In fact, I only heard about Maniac Mansion about like 5 years ago, where this was a game that I played when I was like 8 years old. Now, there isn't really a whole lot I can say about the story because that's pretty much it. It's very basic. But of course, this is a game that takes place in a horror setting, and there's a lot of different things that you'll see in the game, such as a mad scientist with a guy named Igor, vampires, werewolves. In fact, even death shows up within this game. And of course, there's plenty of other monsters that are hazardous, such as like this dog that will just eat you. And probably the most funniest one would be the butler. Yeah, the butler actually kills you in this game, because if you're not wearing the mask when you enter the room, he'll actually give you a pork chop, and then he'll like end up cutting your head off. It's pretty funny. Then again, this game is actually just funny all around. Like for an example, if you type in "fuck you," it'll just say "same to you, loser." It's very amusing. Alright, so let's talk about the gameplay now. So like I said, you have to type in everything. Well, you don't have to type in everything, but you gotta type in every action, such as like open door, pick up key, get candle, so and so. And I'll be honest with you with one thing, is that I'm not very good at typing, so when I played this game at a very young age, it was actually very helpful for that. Although of course, whenever I try and type fast, I always end up making mistakes, but hey, whatever, it happens. So of course, this game is mostly about finding items and using them at the right time so then you can get further within the story. Just like any other adventure game out there, such as King's Quest. So this game is pretty simple to play, but of course that doesn't mean that it's very easy, especially if it's your first time playing through it. Because there's going to be times where you're not sure exactly what you're supposed to do. In fact, I remember exactly when I was a kid, the first time playing this, it took me forever just to get in the fucking house. So what you end up having to do is that you have to break the pumpkin, and inside the pumpkin there's a key, then you gotta pick up the key and use it on the door, and there you go. But of course, playing this as a kid for the very first time, I had no idea that the pumpkin was even something you can interact with. And of course later on there's even more puzzles that are a lot more complicated than that, but still. It is a pretty short game, but of course it could take some time to beat, especially if it's your first time playing, and of course if you're not using a guide, because you know, the internet is very easy access now, where back when this game first came out, that wasn't such an easy thing. So now let's move on to the controls, and while you really can't go wrong with the controls considering you just have to type anything, and well, if you have a problem with typing, then well, this game isn't going to be for you. And as for walking around, it's actually very easy. In fact, all you gotta do is that you just gotta press whatever direction you gotta go and then press it again to stop. But if you try holding down one of the directions, it's just gonna go very slowly. In fact, it actually kind of makes an annoying noise when you do it. But then again, just pressing it and then tapping it again is actually much simpler, especially for this kind of game. Obviously, something like that wouldn't work in something like Super Mario Bros., but for this game, it works good. So overall, I really don't have very much complaints to say. I mean, yeah, you can't hold down the button, but I mean, hey, that's not really a huge thing. So it's actually really good. Now as for the game's graphics, I have to say, they are actually pretty nice. Now I know what you're thinking, really? This game looks ugly as shit, it's so outdated, blah 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 blah. Well, no shit, Sherlock. This game was made in 1990, of course the game is going to be outdated. But I really do like the bright colors in this game, in fact I think it looks very appealing. Also, that is one of the main reasons why I really wanted this game as a kid, just because it just looked very colorful like. So really, I don't have any problems with the graphics at all, I think they look good for what it is. Now as for the game's music, there isn't a whole lot of music in the game, but of course this is the one theme that they do play at the start of the game, and of course I don't remember the name of the song, but I'm sure we've all heard it in movies before. And then after when that theme is done, it's pretty much silent throughout most of the game, although there are some events where music will play, such as like when the dog shows up or when you have to go face the mummy. By the way, the part with the mummy pissed me the fuck off when I was a kid, oh my god. Even to this day, I still have a hard time with it. But anyways, as for the music, yeah, it doesn't sound that bad. I mean, it's not like the greatest thing you'll ever hear, but it's definitely not the worst thing either. But for MS-DOS, it's fine. Now, if you want to buy this game might be pretty hard to come around, at least if you're trying to look for an original copy, which is on floppy disk, by the way. But there is a CD-ROM version of it too, and while the game usually goes about from $15 all the way to $50. Now, that is quite a lot just for a computer game. And if you do happen to get the copy with the floppy disk, just make sure you actually have a computer that has a floppy disk drive, because, well, if not, then you might not be able to play it, unless there's a way you can actually do that, but I'm not entirely sure. But here's my recommendation of playing this game. Well, at least there's two ways. So your first option is to use an emulator called DOSBox, but the only problem I have with DOSBox is that it's a real bitch to set up at times. Especially trying to get certain games to work, where some games will work differently than others, yeah, it's just a pain in the ass. But if you can actually figure out how to use it, then there you go, there's your first option. And as for your second option, and this is my personal recommendation just because it's so much easier, and that happens to be playing them on your web browser. All you gotta do is go on Google and type in play MS-DOS games, and you should find a couple links that will have some websites that you can actually emulate the games on there. You can think of it as playing a flash game on your computer, but just you're playing some abandonware games or just games that are on MS-DOS. So that is my personal recommendation, mainly because it's just so much easier to use. And it won't cost you an arm and a leg for something that may or may not work on your computer. Because I can tell you one thing about my computer, getting certain games to run on here is an asshole. Now, I don't want to get too much into detail about this, but one thing I will say is that games like Roller Coaster Tycoon, Carmageddon, Empire Earth, just any of the Empire games really. Now those games do work pretty well on my computer, oddly enough, but one thing that is really weird is that games like Return to Castle Wolfenstein won't even work on my computer at all. It's really weird. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I thought about getting an older computer that has an operating system of Windows XP just to play these older games, but whatever, it'll be something I'll do in time. And that's also another reason why I don't really do a lot of game reviews on PC games, is because I always have hard times working around them. So like I already said, your best bet is probably using an emulator on a web browser. It works great. So now, if I were to rate this game, I'd have to give it an 8 out of 10. Even playing this game now, I still have a lot of fun playing it. The game has a good sense of humor, and if you're stuck somewhere and you finally figured out how to do it, it's very satisfying. And personally, I consider this to be a classic DOS game. And there's really not a whole lot I can complain about. I mean, the only one complaint I can think of is that the game is pretty short, and especially if you know what to do exactly at every single moment, then the game is even shorter. But that's such a small flaw that it almost doesn't even matter. And I guess you could say that the walking isn't really like the greatest thing ever, but it does work with this sort of game. But other than those two things, I really can't think of much else to say, so really, this is actually a really good game. And no, I'm not blinded by nostalgia. Because I actually do enjoy these adventure games where you have to type things in or you have to like click on to somewhere. I do enjoy those quite a lot. Now before we end things, I'm going to talk a little bit about the series in general. Yes, the Hugo series actually has 3 games, technically 4, but I'll mention that in a moment. And I figured I might as well talk about them here because I really don't know if I can do like a full length review on them, considering that they do play pretty much exactly like this game but just have different settings and stories. So the second game in the series is called Hugo 2 Whodunit. And that one was released in 1991, and it actually takes place in a big mansion where you play as the character Penelope, and you have to solve a murder that happens. It's actually really fun, and the game actually does feel a lot longer, especially if you go to that maze part. Because let me tell you, that part is frustrating as hell. And then there's Hugo 3, Jungle of Doom. I guess they were inspired by Indiana Jones with this one. And this one was released in 1992, and it takes place in a jungle, obviously. And the character you play as is Hugo's uncle. You know, I find it kind of funny that it's called the Hugo series, and yet the only game you use him in is in the first one. Well, I guess this is the exact same thing like Donkey Kong Country, just like in the first game of that one you can use DK, but in the other ones, he's being kidnapped all the time. Well, anyways, Jungle of Doom was pretty fun, but it's probably my least favorite of the 3. Mainly because there's this part where you get stuck in a cage and it's like almost impossible to get out. Well, it's not impossible, but it just, you spend most of your time in that one section of the game where it's just really annoying. I did not play this one as much, not nearly as much as the other 2. but I wouldn't call it like a piece of shit. It's just, you know, not as good as the other two. And then there's one spin-off game, although some people say this is like the fourth Hugo game, but I'm calling it a spin-off just because of the fact that the gameplay is so drastically different that you wouldn't even think this thing has actually existed. Also, it goes back to the horror setting, and that happens to be Nightmare 3D, which was released in 1994. And you wouldn't believe it, but this game is a first-person shooter that uses the Wolfenstein 3D engine. Or at least I think it's the Wolfenstein 3D engine. It looks a lot like it anyway. But yes, this is actually one game I would consider doing a separate review for, but I will have to say it here is that I remember this game being pretty awesome. In fact, the music in the background of this video is actually from Nightmare 3D, and all I have to say is that it has an awesome OST. And so far, that's the end of the series, and I really don't know if they'll ever make another one, but if they do, I'd be more than welcome to have it. So that's all I have to say about this classic, but also forgotten PC game and its series. Well, I consider it to be forgotten, mainly because I don't hear many people talking about it. But I'm pretty damn sure I'm not the only one that grew up playing them, so either way. I really enjoy them myself, and all I have to say is that have a good, happy Halloween, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching and commenting.